Welcome to what is now the last class of this lecture series, of the Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series and Life as an Entrepreneur. We have a change in speaker today because Reed Hunt had a last-minute cancellation and could not be here today, although if you attend this class in a future lecture, he's intending to come back and reschedule with us. But we are very fortunate that the person who helped us get Reed Hunt eventually to speak here was honorable enough to find a replacement, and that replacement is in fact herself, Stacey Lawson. And no, it's very good. I'm looking at the frown on her face. In introducing Stacey, actually, we've not had Stacey up till now in our Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series, even though she's very close to our teaching programs here at UC Berkeley. And it's really about time that we've had her come and speak. And she's just an incredible amount of wealth of information to offer in the area of entrepreneurship and in general in management, growth venture management as well as general management. She's been an entrepreneur she was the founder of and president of InPart, which is a venture-backed startup, and it was acquired by PTC, Parametric Technology Corporation, in 1998. She's also been a very successful executive, being vice president and division general manager of Foreseeable Systems and a senior, and I guess I forgot to say this, being acquired into Parametric Technology Corporation, she was also the senior vice president, the chief marketing officer at PTC. Finally, she is on a number of advisory and board, just general board positions, including Social Fusion, Dragonfly Media. She's an advisor to the CRG Research Group, and to Claremont Creek, the Venture Fund, and Cabo Wellness. So with all of this, we're very happy to have you speak to the group today. Stacey, please.
So I have a green light. Am I on? You can hear me? Okay. Thanks for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. My friend Reed had to change his plans at the last minute, so I think this means that I'm going to get a very expensive dinner from him next time. And I get the chance to talk to you guys today. So I'm here to share a little bit about what I've learned during my 15 years or so now in and around and among entrepreneurs, both as an advisor, an investor, and an entrepreneur myself. Hopefully we'll glean some nuggets of wisdom. So before I start, I wanted to ask the question, how many of you you must be interested in entrepreneurship or you wouldn't be here, but how many of you have a burning idea that you want to start right away? Okay, few hands. How many of you think that entrepreneurship or doing a startup is something you might do within the next 5 years? Okay, and 10 years, this is sort of a longer term goal for you. Okay. So that was most hands in the room. It seems like everyone has some degree of interest in incorporating early stage companies or startups in your career path. So that being said, how many of you have actually taken a course on entrepreneurship, either at the CET or the business school? Great, then this question should be easy. What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What's the definition of entrepreneurship? Who can? Back there?
It's a management style where you pursue opportunities without regard to current.
Very good. You must have taken the 190 course with John Bergstone and team. You've probably seen this slide before. Right? So the sort of core theme here, right, is without regard to resources currently under control, right? There's an amount of risk and aggressive pursuit of opportunity. Finding that opportunity and going at it with all of your will, your heart, your soul, your sweat equity in order to create something that doesn't exist today. And that's a very intense and powerful path. And I wanted to share with you a little entrepreneurial tale, which is my story. Iqbal shared a little bit about my background, but I wanted to give you a little bit more flavor around what this looked like for me. So I grew up in a small logging and mill town in the northwest part of Washington State, a tiny little town. And I ended up becoming an engineer. I'm a chemical engineer by training. I did that undergrad. And right out of college, I worked for IBM in semiconductors for several years. But pretty quickly, I realized that the pure technical piece, while very interesting, didn't incorporate as much of the business stuff as I was hungering for. So I went back to business school, thinking these are skills that I will need to be an entrepreneur at some point in my life. But I had no intention of starting a company right away. It was just sort of a training ground. So I went to Harvard Business School, and as it turned out, one of the courses that I took was a course that involved writing a business plan. And I had no burning idea, but I was required to come up with one. So I started calling around to friends and former colleagues. I called an ex-colleague of mine at IBM. I hadn't worked with directly, but someone I respected, and ran a large design team at IBM. And as we started talking, we came up with this idea for an online offering that would deliver design information and support sourcing application for engineers and procurement people within large companies. And the more I thought about this idea, the more I thought, this is a really good idea. It was almost like the idea itself grabbed hold of me. And as I worked through the process in the course, there was something that sort of captured my imagination, and every day it was like, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. And so I spent time on my own outside of the assignment in the basement computer lab programming the first prototype. And I asked my soon-to-be partner, John at IBM, if he would design up a whole bunch of models that we could put into the prototype. And I started calling customers. I called John Deere, I called Boeing, I called Cummins, Pratt & Whitney, others, and asked, would you be interested in being part of a Harvard research study, I made this up, investigating new procurement and sourcing tools, and tell us what you think about a prototype we're putting together? They all said yes. And so as part of this experiment, I started getting feedback from potential customers. What did they like? What didn't they like? What was their real need? What was the problem they had? What was that problem costing them? What benefits would they see in addressing that problem? What tools would be consistent with their internal environment that would be easy to adopt inside and for users to use? So it was by interacting with a customer that this idea went from being just sort of a theoretical possibility to, wow, this could really happen. So to make a long story short, I was so convinced that this needed to be done, even though I only had 2 years of work experience and barely an MBA. After graduation, I moved to Silicon Valley. I didn't have a car, I didn't have a home, I had no income. I had 80 grand in debt, but I had a business plan and a prototype. And I started schlepping up and down Sand Hill Road, knocking on doors, saying, will you give me money? I said it a little bit more savvy than that, but the bottom line was many people said no, many. So it took me about 4 or 5 months to raise our first $1 million of capital. But those 4 or 5 months, I would say, were probably one of the hardest periods of my life. Just in terms of getting no every single day on something that I felt needed to happen, but I could be crazy. What did I know? I had no experience. I'd never run a company before. I'd never raised money before. I'd never sold to a major customer. And so it really was there was a certain amount of fortitude required as an entrepreneur to sort of believe in myself and go through that process without getting too terribly discouraged while I was sleeping on a couch and had massive debt on my credit cards that were racking up. So the end of this story is that we did end up getting funding. We grew a company, and we ended up selling it about 2 years later to Parametric for quite a nice outcome. And all of that hard work up front was worth it. And I'll be telling you a little bit more of the story as we go through the presentation today. But I'm here to basically, in whatever way I can, sort of distill that experience with, in part, along with the sort of rest of the 360-degree view I've had of entrepreneurship. So from an entrepreneur, I went to being an executive who was interacting with many small companies. I actually did 4 different acquisitions while I was at PTC and Siebel of young startups that we brought into large corporations. And in my roles now as board member, investor, and I'm also a limited partner in several venture funds, had the opportunity to kind of see entrepreneurship from many different angles and distill down some pearls that I try to help young entrepreneurs as they navigate their way through the startup process. So I have 10 principles, and not a lot of time, so we'll go through them quickly. Principle 1 is to make meaning, not money. And I say this not because you shouldn't make money, but because from my perspective, meaning comes first. Right? The world doesn't need one more business. If you're just going out there to find a quick flip, make some cash and jet out, I mean, you can do that, but that doesn't make the world a better place. The world doesn't need one more business. What the world really needs is you on fire. You with your heart and your intention out there building something that matters to you. And so when I say make the world a better place, I mean that do something that means something to you. You know, you could say that Google is just another search engine, but Google was founded on the premise that democratizing information and making it widely available to people that didn't have it would actually make the world a better place. There was a core set of values and a core meaning on which that company was built. And I would say any technology company has the capacity to deliver meaning as well as money. And so if you can find that, you'll be starting off from a much richer place. Say also to serve your stakeholders with care. So don't only think about this as how do you build a company, but how do you go make the lives of your customers better? Either make them more productive or make them enjoy their lives more. For your employees, how do you give them a place to work that's better than anywhere else? Right? For your partners, how do you bring a level of integrity to that engagement so that you're the better partner than anyone they can find in the marketplace? From that starting point, you will be able to build miraculous companies. And so I just urge you to start from this sort of core base of living the values that mean something to you and using the business that you're starting as a way to express the meaning that you want to cultivate in your own life. Right? I teach now executive leadership seminars and retreats, and often I do a little exercise around values. And I ask people, think of 2 or 3 people in history, in mythology, in the modern day, in your family, someone you don't know, whoever it is, that sort of symbolizes a core value or capability that you really, really admire, right? And think about what is it in them that really inspires you. Those are your values. And go find a way to actually instill them in the business that you're putting together. So I wanted to start from this place. From here, we now have a basis of our heart, our minds, our full person is engaged, and we can go build something that really can make a difference. Principle number 2 is break the paradigm. So like a surfer, you're not interested in what's going on in this wave, right? There may be people riding it and it's already coming into shore, but sort of looking out to the next wave. So you don't build great companies by, say you're a book retailer, and you decide, well, I'm gonna go from carrying 250,000 titles to 275,000. That's not very interesting. But if you can go from carrying 250,000 titles to 2.5 million titles, then you've got an Amazon. Right? So as you all know, innovation matters, and looking out to the next curve is key. The one place where you can find these interesting opportunities is to actually look to cannibalizing the cash cows. So where are the places where there's clearly a ton of value creation, where the mainstream market has already is adopting, and where value is being generated, but the technology or the underpinning is the old wave, and you're looking for the new? So when I was at Siebel Systems, we were selling CRM, customer relationship management. And there was this little company called Salesforce.com that came into the market. Now we thought we were pretty hot shit, and we were selling big corporate systems. We were selling $10, $20, $30 million software deployments. And Salesforce came in selling software to our customers on a rental basis. And we didn't pay them much mind, quite frankly. We kind of toyed around with doing that model, offering web-based solutions. We weren't very good at it, so we shut those things down. And we sort of convinced ourselves that what Salesforce.com was doing wasn't really going to be important for us. Lo and behold, well, Siebel was acquired. They no longer exist. They were acquired by Oracle. Salesforce.com has built a very solid business. They are a leader, a pioneer, if you will, in new software models that have revolutionized the way software is sold. So these are the examples where you have an existing cash cow, where you wouldn't want to go head-to-head against Siebel with the same model, but where if you look to the next curve, you may find really interesting opportunities to exploit. No matter what you do, though, make sure that what you're offering is a painkiller and not a vitamin. A vitamin is nice to have. A painkiller is absolutely necessary and often addictive. Right? You want your customers to be addicted to what you've got. So always ask yourself the question, how valuable is this? What is the need? What is the pain? And how necessary is what I've got to the marketplace and to the customer I'm serving? If you can put all these three together, you'll have a winning formula. Principle number 3 is to know your customer and know your market. So inevitably, as an entrepreneur, you will make mistakes. I've never seen a company, I'm not sure there ever has been one, where the initial plan is what they end up executing, or they didn't make a number of mistakes along the way that required learning and recasting. So you need a big enough market to allow for those mistakes. Right? You need to give yourself wiggle room. You need to be able to stretch out and to make the mistakes necessary to learn and lock in the model that's going to be a successful one. So either find a really big market or a big enough niche that you can dominate to give yourself that wiggle room. Okay? Related to that, you need to know your customer. So I call this a day in the life. At InPart, we actually went and spent days, literally every moment, we were shadowing design engineers, learning what they did every minute of their day. You need to know what your customer does between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Or if it's not a corporate customer, whenever they would be engaging with your product, you need to know what they're doing. Right? Follow them around, shadow them, understand what else they buy, what needs they have, how what you're doing will integrate with what other activities or processes or communities they're dealing with in their lives, so that you know them inside and out. What that gives you is a lot of information about how to segment the market. As a young company, you can't be a shotgun. You won't have enough resources to go after everyone. So you have to know how to segment your market and pick key segments to go after first. If you don't know your customer, you won't know how to segment. If you know them, there will be obvious ways that they fall into groupings. That may be by geography or by industry, by usage characteristics, by loyalty patterns. You'll find them if you know your customer well. If you're at a point in your business where you can't segment or you don't know the proper segments, then you don't know your customer yet. You have to go back to square one. This is sort of like a don't pass go sort of thing, right? Go back and learn more, and the segmentation will become clear. Principle number 4, when you finally have got it, you know what you're selling and you know who you're selling it to, I encourage sort of a process that, the idea here is to say it as powerfully as possible. And this example here I actually stole from Guy Kawasaki over at Garage Ventures. But I want to ask the question up here, whose mission statement do you think this is? Quote, our guiding mission is to deliver superior products and services for our customers and communities through leadership, innovation, and partnerships. Shh. If you know the answer, don't say it. Okay? This could be anyone. Would you even know what industry they were in? No. So the point here is that kind of mission statement is completely useless. There's no value in that. It doesn't say anything, and it doesn't direct anything. This mission statement happens to be for Wendy's. Right? Who would have guessed that a hamburger shop would have a mission statement like that? Right? So the guidance here is to make these sort of visioning tools meaningful. Boil it down to a simple mantra that actually gives you guidance and meaning. So some examples here, BMW, the ultimate driving machine. It not only captures sort of the intention of the gestalt of the company, but it also has an emotional pattern to it, and it says something to a customer. So to the extent that you can take your message and boil it down into something very powerful, a mantra is something that actually contains energy within it, right? That actually captures the energy of what you're trying to put out into the marketplace in the words themselves and in a very simple, powerful, punchy way, right? Number 5, have a real business model. I may be old-fashioned in this regard and perhaps a little conservative. I still feel like a young technologist type, but I may be a generation behind, but I still like to have business models associated with the companies that I work with. So for me, the notion of building it and they will come, it may happen, and we've seen cases like this. I mean, YouTube still doesn't have a business model, but one would say they've had an amazing impact in the marketplace and have been successful in terms of capturing the value of what they've built, at least for the founding team and some of the employees. So if you can take that sort of powerful technology and match it with a business model, you may not know which model is going to work, but having at least 2 or 3 ways that are legitimate ways to monetize what you're doing, that can drive revenue, that could build a big firm, it's a nice place to start. So I would encourage you to really think through this. The combination of innovative technology and a probable business model that you can learn from once you're in the market and adjust is, in my mind, still necessary for me to invest. Now, we see venture capitalists who've made a lot of money who didn't require this up front. You may need to go to them instead of me for your venture. But for me, the combination of these 2 things is the winning formula. Principle number 6 is, once you have some ideas that you think are solid, get going. So one of the most powerful things that happened at Impart was that prototype that got built in the SHAD lab, the basement computer lab at Harvard. It was a piece of crap. Right? I couldn't have taken it anywhere except as a demonstration device to the VCs. But it helped us get a lot of information from the marketplace. So in this sort of prototype beta phase or sort of the Harvard research study, it allowed us, just by virtue of having something to put in front of people, to capture way more information than we would have been able to in a theoretical sense. So I say, avoid analysis paralysis. There are kind of 2 types of entrepreneurs. One that considers PowerPoint as the major sort of selling tool, and the other that's sort of willing to get their hands dirty and put together something that can be sort of seen and felt and interacted with by customers and investors. So get going, prototype, and in my opinion, good is good enough. You don't need to be perfect before you go to market. In fact, you'll never get there if you wait that long. So your version 1 may be not perfect. It may have some problems still, but as long as it still provides value, and as long as it's not problematic, i.e. buggy or has issues, right, then what you learn by being in the market is going to be extremely valuable, much more than what detriment you might find. So have a solid plan and then test. The iteration is really key. Principle number 7. Now we get to the money part. When I said in the beginning, make money or make meaning, not money, I certainly wasn't suggesting that you can forego the money part in a venture. Part of the sort of fiduciary responsibility of any new venture is that there's an attempt to optimize financial value and return for the shareholders and other stakeholders. So what you need here is a financial plan, just like a development plan. And what I mean here is to actually create a financial model that sort of takes into account the milestones of the business. This is where I see a lot of young entrepreneurs kind of not sort of get what the financial plan is all about. So the notion of the early financial plan is a tool to help you minimize and optimize the risk-reward trade-off as it relates to financing. So if you understand what the key milestones of the business are, at each one of those milestones, you're reducing risk, right? The farther along you can get with a certain amount of money, and or the better the team, the more you reduce risk and reduce your cost of capital, right? And the more you can also map certain types of capital to the right stages of the company. So if you understand that you can get to X milestone on this much money, and then the next milestone takes, say, 5 times that much, you can think about, okay, I might want to go to angels or friends and family or individual investors to sort of get to that first milestone. Then a VC would be interested, or then I would have something that I could show to an institutional investor. So mapping the financing plan and the milestones of the business and of the development schedule is a tool that allows you to build your company without giving away too much, right? To manage risk, to take out risk, and map your capital to that. I put at the end, at the last bullet point here, missing your milestones causes a venture capitalist to become vulture capitalists. So at InPart, we went right out to VC and raised that from the get-go. So, and that was at an early stage. We had, as I mentioned, a prototype and a business plan, but not any customers. So that money was very expensive. I did that on purpose at the time because for me, as an entrepreneur who didn't really know what I didn't know and didn't know if I was crazy, I felt like I needed the justification of that VC endorsement to move forward with the business. If I couldn't get it, then I was gonna, well, I guess I was gonna walk away. I'm not sure what I would have done, actually. And so I made the choice that sort of institutional weight and validation and their support and help was important enough to me at that early stage to give away more. And I did. It was expensive. For that first round, I gave away 35+% of my company. That's not necessary, right? And if I did it over today, I would definitely not do that the same way. I wouldn't have to, and the VCs would give me much, probably plusher valuations than when being a sort of recent college grad. But so there are sort of trade-offs here about how you stage the type of investment and what you're looking for in that early stage. And it may well be that you can get quite a ways along using angel money or friends and family money or individual investors that allow you then to sort of jump into more institutional monies with a lower valuation. Principle number 8 is to build an exceptional team. And for me, people are number one. You probably hear that a lot. I don't know if you've had VCs. I guess we haven't had any VCs in this round of the lecture series, but in many of the classroom lectures and so forth. And it's very common to hear, the number one thing I look at is the entrepreneur. People are key. And what's really important is the fire in the belly. And I'm sure you've heard that phrase a lot. But for me, as a 25-year-old with no experience, what ultimately they were betting on was my passion, my absolute conviction and belief that this was not only doable, but it had to be done. And no matter what, I would sort of break myself to get it done. And that I would do whatever it took to build that business and to return them a sizable return. And it was clear that's where I was coming from. And I know when VCs invest in these young teams out of Stanford or Berkeley or other places, they see that passion, they see the fire in the belly. If you don't believe, no one else will believe. So that's why principle number 1 is key here. If you're doing something that's meaningful to you, that you really believe in, that you think has to happen, then that will be palpable. It will be really clear. And many people like me will want to be part of that because it's really exciting to see young entrepreneurs get that spark and to see it in their eye, like, we're going to go do this. That is one of the most exciting things about being involved with startups, is that passion and that spark. I think it's really important as you think about hiring as a founder that you look for employees or co-founders or executive team members that have that spark for your business, right? It's also important, I use this word responsibility. And I talked about this a little bit in the 190 course that I taught. And to me, this is hiring the kind of person who always feels like there's something they can do. They're not a victim of external circumstance. We can never control what things we're going to run into. The market will do crazy stuff. The stock market will crash. Our customers will go out of business in the middle of the largest deal we've ever done. You know, crazy stuff happens. But at the end of the day, we are all responsible about how we respond. And so, you know, if you get grumpy, curmudgeon-y, negative people, they will grind you down. And as an entrepreneur, you do not have time for that. Right? You've got too big a job to do. And it takes too much energy to build a company. Right? So whatever you do, don't hire grumpy, negative people. Hire people who are positive or who are victims. Do not hire people with victim mentality. Hire people who are positive, who think of every challenge as an opportunity. Every day you come into work, it's like, oh, wow, guess we've got a new opportunity today. Our largest deal just went south. Great, what are we going to do about that? Right? To have people on your team that have that kind of attitude and that are sort of in it with you and who are going to do whatever it takes to right things when they turn wrong are the kind of people you want on your team. So even if you find someone with a perfect skill set and you think their resume looks absolutely stellar, right? If they're not positive and engaged, don't waste your time. Literally, don't waste your time. It will be a hire that sets you back far more than you can imagine. Right? So I encourage you to find people who resonate at the same sort of resonance level as you as it relates to the excitement, enthusiasm, and the absolute commitment to go make this happen, no matter what. Right? And in that process, there's this key part, because sometimes when we get aggressive and we're go-getters like that, egos can come into play, and especially on a team that's high intensity, that can cause friction. So be humble, right? This is an adventure, and oftentimes the hiring process may mean you need to hire people that are smarter than you are and that are complementing skill sets you don't have. As a founder, that may seem challenging. The first thing that I did when I raised the venture money is I went out and hired a CEO. I was the founder. The first thing I did was hire my boss, in a sense. I mean, it wasn't really like that, but because as a founder, you're sort of always in charge. But know that. You're always in charge. You can be humble and hire people who have the skills you don't have. I hired an executive from HP who had 20 years of experience in the software business. Right? As it turns out, he was thrilled to have me go be the face of the firm. I spent my time in the market with customers, PR and the marketplace. He was happy to run the operations. And that was a really powerful match. If I hadn't been humble enough to seek my better half, my other half, then that power couldn't have come into play in the company. So look for great people and be humble. And principle number 9 is sort of more of that. Hire even more exceptional people. Right? There's actually studies that show that A people hire A+ talent. B people hire C people, and C people hire D people. Right? So if you start your company by hiring a couple B people, you're on the road to mediocrity. Right? So have enough confidence and enough humility to go hire people that will make you look smart by being smarter than you. If you can imagine there's someone out there smarter than you. Right? Because those are the kinds of teams you really want to work on. The A+ teams are really fun. Really, really fun. The B teams are sort of a grind, and the C teams are untenable. Right? So you want to make sure that you're not coming in feeling frustrated with all your B players. Right? That you've had the confidence and the humility to hire A players, that when you come in the door, you know it's taken care of. They're coming to you for key decisions, for direction, maybe coaching and mentoring, right? But you know that if you're on the road for a whirlwind 2-week, 5 customers in 25 cities kind of tour, that everyone back home has got it covered. That will give you such peace of mind. So I can't stress enough how important it is to hire better than yourself, hire exceptional people. The leader, i.e. founder in startups, is the most important person. That never goes away. There's always a founder mystique, and you will always have that sort of natural power and authority. But to bring in leaders at every level will make your life a lot easier. And through that, you make the pie a lot bigger, and everyone gets to be a part of it. So principle number 10, as you can see, there's a certain theme that I seem to sort of drill in, and that's sort of people in leadership, is to, once you have that team of rock stars, is to really lead them with integrity. So inspire others through a shared vision, but don't dictate how they do their job, unless they need. Sometimes that's reasonable, sometimes that's necessary. But enable others to act, be a role model, sort of model how you want the firm to be yourself. If you don't, you're a hypocrite. So it's really important that you embody the values that you set and the mission that you've set forth on, and that you are an exemplar of that to all those in the firm. Right? And once you've got sort of that process in place, continue to challenge it. Continue to raise the bar. Continue to figure out how to do it better. And in the process of that, encourage people, not only from the head, which we often bring to work easily, but in the heart. Again, are we sticking to the meaning that we wanted to? Are the values expressed in the firm? Are we creating something that we're proud of? Right? Startups are a lot of work. I mean, they really are. They're a lot of hard work. It makes it so much easier when you get up every day thinking, this is great. I'm here because it means something to me. If you're doing it just to make a buck, and you're a couple years in, and the product's late, and you have some customer problems, deployments have extended, and new competitors have entered. You'll have those days, and the only thing that sustains you through those days is what's going on in your heart. Right? What does this mean to you? Why were you here in the first place? How do you continue to live that in the firm? Make your business a part of finding happiness and meaning in your life, not something that you do for 12, 15 hours a day and then go home and do the fun stuff. Right? It's got to be fun, and it has to matter. So with that, I'll sort of sum it all up. I guess the bottom line here is that exceptional people is the beginning and the end. Right? And there's some things in the middle which are about finding big markets and expressing things powerfully and making sure you know your customer and delivering a lot of value to them. And to me, the customer is core. So it's sort of like the customer is core sandwiched by the people that are bringing the value to that customer. And with this is sort of ecosystem and your heart and drive, I'm absolutely sure you will build a fabulous, fabulous venture. So with that, I guess we have a few minutes to open up to questions if there's any questions. Thanks. Yeah.
When you're doing an interview, what are some good questions to ask to determine whether the person's like a really positive thinker, or it might be a bit hard just to gauge from your conversation in general?
I asked things. So the question was, when you're interviewing, how do you determine if someone's a positive thinker? And so I would say there's a couple ways. So one is I often focus in on the challenging spots and have them express to me what were the sort of key challenges either in their career or life, and then how they dealt with that. You can get a lot from just how people describe what a challenge is to them. Right? Some people will go, challenge. Well, I can tell you at a time where there was, where there was a difficulty, but this is what we did, X, Y, and Z. And there's others that are sort of like the, oh, woe is me kind of. The other place you can definitely find out about this is through references. So references often, once you've sort of made initial assessment, talking to the people who they've worked for or with can be very powerful. And also asking them about how, asking them questions about how they interact with and deal with other people, especially those who aren't performing or where they're sort of difficult cases, and seeing how they respond and their sort of style of addressing that kind of thing. Yeah, back here?
At what point in your product's development should you start talking to a venture capitalist?
So the question is, at what point in your product development should you start talking to a venture capitalist? Don't know that there's actually one answer to that question. Partly because sometimes it takes money to develop products. Sometimes you have a team in place that's willing to put sweat equity in and get something quite far along before a lot of capital is needed. So it really depends on the sort of construction of your core founding team and what skill sets they have. So I was an engineer, but not a computer scientist. I had some technical expertise, but it was pretty limited. And in order for us to start building a software product, we needed funding. We needed to actually hire a development team. That wasn't part of the founding team's skill set. So we needed funds early. You know, if you're a team of Berkeley students out of the CS department, you may be able to get quite far along in developing a product and getting some good feedback from the market, and even in having some customer usage, maybe even a beta, an alpha or a beta, before you go for capital, in which case you're going to have reduced risk, like I talked about in that slide. So as far as you can get to a milestone that significantly reduces risk, the better off you are waiting to that point to go for expensive money, because you're going to give away less. So I would encourage you to get as far as you can, but it sort of depends on what skill sets you have available to you that are willing to work for sweat equity for some time before the money comes in. Yep?
You mentioned that you were completely broke and you were raising money.
Yeah.
And you were in debt. How did you decide, or how should you decide, what salary to give yourself with the money you raised?
So the question was, how do you decide what salary to give yourself? So because I raised VC money, I had a board right away, and the board had some input on what salary I gave myself. So I didn't take anything until we got the money. I didn't have any money to give myself. Right? And then once we did, it was a situation where we'd done an institutional VC round, and now I had investors who completely understand the startup model and know that if you're going to squeeze blood out of your entrepreneurs, you're probably going to pay for it down the road. Meaning, you need them to be able to pay their bills, because otherwise they're going to be worrying about their bills and not doing the job at hand. So that was a discussion among the board about executive compensation. And often, that's a negotiation too, because the VCs, want to give you just enough to sort of take care of, any issues, but certainly not make it so plush that you're going to lose interest. There's models for executive comp in the Valley. There's lots of benchmarks and best practices once you're funded. Before that, it's a matter of kind of cash flow and cash flow constraints. I mean, any of the core team, if you have money, it's sort of just enough to sort of get by until you can get to a milestone where you can get sort of the right sort of cash into the company. So again, that's a little bit of a nuanced thing. But I think that once you're funded, having competitive salaries with an equity component is important. The people need to feel like they don't have to be scrapping and worried about getting to the next paycheck, because that's going to distract them from the work at hand, right? So I would look to comparable models in the Valley and make sure you're in a range that makes sense for a startup. And in fact, we probably have some of, I don't know if the CET does, but competitive benchmarking on executive salaries and stuff. Yeah.
When you do finally get acquired, or you sell your company, how do you split the money among the employees or the engineers? How do you decide that, especially as a founder?
Right. So the question was, once you do get acquired or have a liquidity event, how do you know how to divvy up the proceeds among the players, right? And that happens actually, that gets set up very early on in the capital table or the cap structure of the company. So when you have any sort of investor come in, they will value the company, meaning, and you may have multiple investors that are sort of bidding or involved in sort of helping you set the price for the company. And at that point, they will buy an equity stake in the company. So they are actually basically telling you today, what is the company worth? And based on that, I'm going to buy 20% of it for the $2 million I'm going to give you. Okay? Usually at the time you have a financing event, you will be putting in place you may have decided this before, but often the sort of legal work goes around the financing event. How you're divvying up the founders part of it. So if you have 2 founders, you may decide you're 50-50, right? Then a VC buys 20% of the company, right? So you're diluted as they come in and buy 20%. At that point, they'll probably tell you need to create an equity pool an option pool for your employees. Rule of thumb is around 20%. So you actually create a set of shares, roughly 20% of the company, that will be assigned to employees as you grow. Right? Of that option pool, there are standard rules of thumb about what percentage is usually gotten by a CEO or a VP of sales or a VP of marketing, and you will give away those pieces as you hire those folks on board. So pretty soon you have a capitalization structure that actually has multiple people, but it's very defined what percentage you have. Down the road, you may actually bring in additional financing. So another investor comes in and buys 30% of your company because you raised another 10 million, say. Now all of the folks that are in there get diluted by that by a certain percent. So over time, your cap structure evolves as you bring in more employees or more investors or other people who are being compensated through equity. And at the end of the day, when you get acquired, the overall pool of proceeds are split based on the percentages that exist in the current ownership table. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you for tolerating me rather than Reed Hunt today. I'm sorry he couldn't be here, but hopefully you got something out of this. Thanks.